Thank you again, everyone, for joining us this morning. We have Adaptivation's Lori Dahlquist and John Eckrich. I'm going to go ahead and give it to them.
Thank you, Chandra. Yes, just as she said, my name is John. I'm the president of Adaptivation. This is Lori. Lori, she's our speech educator. She's the one who really speaks your language well. Um, Chandra, if you don't mind, if there's any chats that come up, could you just monitor those? Because that would be wonderful.
Absolutely.
And just a reminder for everybody to mute your microphone because on speaker mode, if you cough or do something, then you'll pop up as the dominant screen on that one. Other than that, I'm going to shift cameras and I'm going to this so you see an overhead view of where Lori will be working. So between that and the PowerPoint, yep, there's my hand.
Yep.
Good. So
Okay.
between that and the PowerPoint, Lori, go ahead and then you just use the up and down arrows
Yep.
for that.
I'm going to start out with just a brief explanation of why light tech, because I think over the years it's kind of lost its space in the world of AAC, and it still plays a real critical role. I like this slide because, again, John being an engineer and me being a speech person, it's like the picture up there of the remotes. John tells me I can put all those remotes at home into one, and that's too complicated for me. I like simple. I like a separate remote for my TV, a separate remote for my sound system. That's what makes sense to me. I also always say all of us use multiple things to communicate. We all have our iPhones, we all have our tablets, we all have our computer. But you know what? We still all use those nice yellow sticky notes. And that's kind of the light tech piece of it. The one thing that bothers me as I go out to schools and consult is they'll say, yes, this student used to use a Big Mac or they used to use a step-by-step, but then they got this and all that went in the drawer. That should never happen. It should be in addition to the things they use. Um, we've added to. It's always in addition to. Don't put things away. There are times when it's very appropriate. I even pulled up, there's been a lot of talk of robust systems and robust vocabulary. And so I pulled up some things. One of them's from Practical AAC, and another one is from from ASHA. And one of it says, merely equipping the individual with a sophisticated AAC device, such as a high-tech device, will not automatically result in better communication outcomes. High-tech solutions can always break down or lose battery support. It is critical to have a permanent backup solution in place, like a simple communication board or visual supports, for example. And that's the thing. Best practice says kids should always have a combination of things and backup because we all know how that stuff breaks down. What makes up an AAC system robust? An AA system is comprised of different elements that work together to offer an array of options for expression. And then it goes on to say, this includes the person's own sounds and their gestures, paper-based tools, mainstream technology, low-tech AAC tools like single message talking switches. See, that's all part of it. There isn't a single device that covers all our bases. Then I always bring this one up because I've seen this, this looks like old data, but I've seen it updated and it all comes out within one or two percentages. And I think this is so important to remember. 55% of communication, so more than 50% is visual. It's all those things, gestures, facial expression, body movement, objects in the environment. But the next biggest chunk is intonation, rate, and intensity. And the devices I'm going to talk about today are all use real recorded voice. Because guess what? Even though the voice of the high-tech devices has improved, it still really lacks that intonation that is so important. And you can see that's the next biggest chunk of communication. And I always give the example when my kids were young and we had a dog, it was, Mom, watch. And they'll say, our dog's name was Molly. Molly, do you want to go outside? And the dog would jump and jump and jump. And then they'd say, Molly, you want to get hit by a car? And the dog would jump and jump the same way. That intonation and inflection is so important. We send out a lot of trial devices, and they come back and it'll have messages like, I have to go to the bathroom. I'm hungry. No, those aren't going to engage that child in communication. When you listen to how their peers are talking, or like this last weekend, I was with my 2.5-year-old granddaughter, and it's like, poopies are coming! And she ran off to the bathroom. We can make them appropriate, but we can also add that intonation and inflection that is so important. And it's something that people aren't always comfortable with, and something we really can take advantage of and have to become comfortable with recording like that and making our messages age appropriate but intense. You can see only 7% are the words that we say, and so we can take advantage of all the other things with our low-tech devices as well. I think the new AI stuff that's coming will really help with some of that in our devices. And some of the devices, you can add inflection and all that, but it's very time consuming. I've done it, but it's very time consuming. And then there's the cues, the visual cues. We saw that over 50% of communication is visual. And, this is just a partial developmental thing. And people always say that, we don't have to go through this. Kids don't have to go through this. And I believe that to a point. But I also believe you need to start visually where they're at. And as I've consulted over the years, it's like you'll go in and someone's using board maker symbols, which is very common and all of that, and I love them, but the child wasn't ready for those. And if we back off a little bit into some real photos to introduce it, it doesn't mean we have to stay there. And where our goal is for all the kids to get to text, but we need to start where they're at. And we tend to do the board maker, the symbol sticks, because that's what's most accessible to us through our computers, through our high-tech devices. But we need to be really careful with that. And we do have, I'll just show you some objects. We have a whole system of object symbols and things, and we'll touch on those as we go. But that's important to be aware visually where they're at. The last few years, I've really had a great opportunity of working with a visual specialist and have some background. I've taken some courses in CBI, and that's a whole nother piece where they can really help you break down the visual part for kids and where they're at visually. So if you have access to a visual specialist, it is time we all work together. That is just critical.
Sorry, I get it. No, just click over here.
What are you doing?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
One more down.
Yeah, one more down. We're going to just touch on objects a little bit. This is just a sampling of our object communication symbols. People have shied away from object because they don't know how to organize it. And the other thing is that we've learned there isn't a lot of research out there on objects, but the one thing that I found to be very critical is once we can't just be handing kids objects for communication. We can teach them objects, but we need to differentiate, like the cup there. That isn't the cup I use to drink. That is my symbol for a cup. And that's why the symbols are mounted. Or the objects are mounted. You mount them to, that's how they become a symbol. They have a border. And so when it's just an object, it's an object. This becomes an object symbol. And we wrote an article, and both of them are on our website, and it's interesting to read. When we first developed the object system, we wrote an article for Closing the Gap. But now as we've learned more with CVI and objects and all that, we updated the article and even right in our article say some of this contradicts our first article just because of what we've learned. And so these objects play a critical role and in the whole visual piece. So if you want more information on that, we can talk more. You're going to see them throughout the presentation as I show you applications and things. Now, where do I have done? Okay. This is just an example. This is the sequencer. I also believe we need to always have a visual cue on our devices. We don't just hand them the purple sequencer. Let's put something on there, whether it's a photo, whether it's an object. So for example, for the Itsy Bitsy Spider book, we put a spider on there, and guess what? The kids were very attracted to that spider, much more so than just hitting the top of the switch. When we first put the spider on there, he looked a little scary, and that's why we added the eyes. It wasn't quite as scary when we added some of the eyes on there. But these devices are easy to just add things that you have laying around. And so it doesn't always have to be a picture. It doesn't always have to be a symbol. Just something on there to relate the device to what you're doing. Single message devices, we have one called the Lex. So this would be, if you're familiar with like a Big Mac switch. The one thing, I'm going to just touch on switches here because you're going to see these switches throughout our presentation. This is a PAL pad, and the top of the single message device on the slide is very similar to that. Many people are familiar with our big red switches or the jelly bean switches, and this is equivalent to that, but it does not have a click. So it is, and you know how kids can kind of perseverate on the click, and you're not sure if they're just clicking or if they're truly activating the switch. So these switches, and we'll talk about other uses for them, because they're flat and there's no moving parts, we're able to incorporate them into activities much more readily than some of the other switches. So the top of that single message device is the equivalent of this. It's very touch sensitive and very light touch. I believe the PAL pads have the lightest pressure touch on the market. If the last I had heard, I don't know of anything else right now that is that way. This is just an example of making a schedule. Again, on the Lex, those object cards fit really nicely. So again, because of that light touch, just adding, you can have it on there, adding that picture cue can activate, just touching the picture cue can activate. So there's multiple ways to use that. Pulling the drink symbol off would activate it. So maybe they're going to go match that somewhere else at the sink or whatever, but you can start to pair those objects, photos, symbols all together like that. Sequencing and randomizing, and that's where I want to spend the most of my time. If you're not familiar with sequential messaging is I can record a series of messages and then play them back in the order that they were played. So for example, just counting, I can record 1 through 10 and every activation it would count. So that's sequential messaging. Our device, we have several of them that do sequential messaging. The first one I'm going to show you is just simply the sequencer. It is this. It has 2 levels, and it's very easy. We have play 1, play 2. You're not going to be able to see that very well, but and record 1 and record 2. So we simply decide which level we're going to put it in. So I switched it to record. Make sure it's on. And then you just press and hold. And while you're holding, you say your message. The nice thing about this, the feature is there's a beep. So you'll press, there's a beep, and then you record. And that's an important feature because what was happening before we had that beep is people would start talking as they pressed. And you can't check these messages until after you've recorded the series. So they would found out they were clipping off the beginning of their messages. Once we put that beep in there and you know to wait for the beep to start talking, that really helps. So for example, I'm just going to record counting. 1, 2, 3. And then I'll flip it to play. 1, 10. I don't know, these have really good voice quality. I don't know how it's coming across on the Zoom, but you just have to trust me on that. You should always, when you're recording, it's just like when you're talking to our kids, you need to record slow and articulate. Each level has 90 seconds of record time, and that doesn't sound like a lot, except when you think of like a 1-minute television commercial, you can get a lot of information in there. Simple children's books. I have one that I've recorded here. I think it's on this one. 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and I got more than halfway through of that story to record. And so they're very simple to record. The other thing I'm just going to remind people of here, I won't do it, but when you record pressing down and releasing when you play back the messages, there's kind of this clunk at the end of the recording, and that's on whether you're using R's or AbleNet switches. It doesn't matter. What it's recording is your release. So we have switch output jacks on these devices. And so I can plug in that PAL pad and record. And because this is flat with no moving parts, if I record by touching the PAL pad and releases, I get a much clearer recording because I don't get that clunk at the end of the message. But we're often recording on the fly. And so you just kind of learn to live with the clunk if you're recording, over and over. The sequencer can also be used, and people forget this, as a single message device. So for example, in a classroom, let's say I'm using it for the child to say the Pledge of Allegiance along with the class. It might be that I record it all as one message, and then they just have to hit once. It might be I record it, I pledge allegiance to the flag, and that they have to hit multiple times. So know that that device can be used as a single message device. But with this, when people are buying equipment, because we know budget is always an issue, it's like, get one that you can use in multiple ways. So you don't have to have just a single message device when this one can do both, if that works for you. And so I really like sequencing. One of the things we uploaded was 100 ways to incorporate sequential messaging. There are so many things that are sequential. The other thing we forget often is that these devices, although they are for expressive language, can also be used receptively. And that's why I have that on there, expressive and receptive. The kids we're learning more and more need to learn to listen to their devices as well. And so things like directions for an activity. Maybe it's a cut, color, paste, or color, cut, paste. And so they hit it and it says, color the rainbow. And then when they're done coloring, they hit it again and it gives them a direction of cut. And then when we hit it again, it gives them the direction of glue. Getting dressed. It can be used as a memory reminder. It can be used for listing on a schedule. But we really need to have our kids learn to listen to their devices. It kind of plays into that whole modeling piece, which I do think is very important. I remember I was in a session with Linda Burkhart, and this has been a few years ago, but she talked about, and I thought this was a great example of, her daughter was in like a Spanish immersion classroom. And in Spanish immersion, they learned Spanish quickly because everybody just talked in Spanish. It's not like they were talking in English and then teaching Spanish. It's immersion. And we need to immerse our kids in their own devices. So we need to use them with the kids. So we're modeling what we need them to do. And we also, they need to learn to listen to them. I think that's very important. Now, the randomizer, again, looks just the same, but it does random order. And so I record in a series of messages and it plays it back in random order. It actually has two modes. One is just truly random. Let's say we're playing Duck, Duck, Goose. And so we just want it to be random and we're not sure when it's going to say goose. In the elimination mode, it's going to give you all the choices randomly before it repeats. So one thing I've seen a lot of teachers do is attendance, putting all the names in where the child has to listen for their name. So it would go through all the names before it repeated, but we don't know when it's going to say our name, which really helps to promote that listening. And so again, we have another handout we gave you guys on 50 ways or 40 ways or something to incorporate random messaging. And so use it, games, replacing a dice, anything, but really working on that listening piece.
All right. And Lori?
Yes.
If they
okay, you're breaking up. We can't hear you.
If you have the sequencer does, and they put you in request chat from Joy. Joy, do you want to ask your question?
So if a student or person using it maybe pushes the sequencer too fast and they end up pushing ahead of the step, is it my understanding you have to sequence all the way through those steps before you can get back to the one you were needing?
Joy, this is John. I was just going to respond to your chat on that. There's two ways to, you're exactly right. If the student is pressing that sequencer too fast, she can get ahead of where you say you're reading a book. Well, she can get 2 pages ahead. And there's 2 ways to get back where you are. One is, yes, you can keep pressing to cycle back through, but there's another way. The sequencer has 2 levels, level 1 and level 2. Each of them are completely separate. You could have separate applications for level 1 and another application for level 2. And you can reset your messages back to the first message. Say you're on level 1, you're reading a book, she gets too far ahead. All you do is you take that switch that's on play level 1, you move it to play level 2, and then you move it back to play level 1. And it knows, I should reset to message 1. So at least you don't have to cycle through all of them. It's a way to quickly get back to 1, but then you'll have to keep pressing, cycling through until you get to your desired message and kind of start over again. There's no way to reset to any given random message. You can only reset to message 1 quickly, and then you have to cycle through after that.
But I'm going to show you one of our other devices that gives you a little more option that way. The other thing is to remember that, especially for our kids that are just learning, I do messages that, like I might record just, if we're reading a book, just record the message, turn the page. So then they, have to request that someone help them do that. Or I like to record sound effects into books. You can hold it up. There's a zillion sound effects, free sound effects things, and you just hold it up to the computer and record so that they're not as specific if you get out of order. So think about that kind of thing too. And I think we'll get to the other device too, and I'll show you the differences and the options. Okay, John, it's not the arrow down, is it?
You have to move the cursor because I changed it.
Okay, just a minute.
Okay, now.
Okay. Okay, so this is just all the features, and I'm going to show you some of the others. Again, we can use it as a single message. We talked about the time. There is a switch jack. We talked about that. Now, I'm going to show you some things to use with that. We often think of just using the switch jack with kids who can't access here, maybe adding a head switch or something. But I want to show you some fun things we can do with switches just to kind of enhance the activity. The other thing it has, and both of the sequencer and the randomizer have these features, is the relay jack. And I really like this. Okay. So a relay, I want to see what I have in this one, just a minute. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. So our relay jack will run any kind of a battery operated device for the length of the message or for the amount of time you've recorded. So you're going to see this light come on every time I push this. Okay. This is for my adapted scissor, which I'll show you now. Okay, this is the randomizer. Stay on the line. I like this. So many of our kids, one of the skills we have to work on with our kids is being aware when their device is speaking. And while their device is speaking, they need to be looking at the listener and those kinds of skills. And I have found adding a light or something and explaining that, if that light is on, you are talking and you need to be looking at the person you're talking to. And I've trained kids with the light, looking in the mirror, keeping their eyes in the mirror, watching themselves, that kind of thing. So it can be a good learning tool that way, but it can also just be a fun thing. So for example, this is my battery operated scissor. And what I did is, so I recorded messages in my sequencer, because they're probably not the one holding the scissor. Let's say their paraprofessional is holding the scissor and they're going to make it go. So I recorded messages like, keep cutting, stay on the line. And when they push that, so it keeps going. All right. And so those are things you can pair. You can pair things like we all have the jumpy dogs and hopping rabbits and all theirs, that we can also pair then voice output with those rather than them just hitting the switch. It might be messages like, hey, come over here and watch this. Wasn't that cool? Those kinds of things, so that those kinds of activities can actually become interactive. And so pairing those, and it's a feature that people often forget is in there. Another one would be, just because I have to see, what do I have in this one? Yeah, okay. So for this one, I'm talking about Christmas. So these are just some battery operated Christmas lights. And I have messages, how many days till Christmas? What do you want for Christmas? And you can, I don't know, you can't see. On the line. There's my Christmas light. And these are my dollar store Christmas lights. I can put them here. I can put them here. And so that's just kind of fun enhancements that you can use with that. So just know that all those are options. I'm going to clear my space. This is what happens when I do this. I'm sorry, we're having to go fast. One of the things, the fun ones that people have used the sequencer, a combination of the sequencer and that flat pal pad. So is for reading. And so here we've put that pal pad in the back of the book. When I plug it in, not going to be the right messages here. Whoops. Okay. So now I have my switch plugged into my sequencer, or my randomizer in this case. But touching this now is just like touching the top. Did I erase my messages? Let's see. I did. Well, let me get a different one. Oh, you don't have the right cord plugged in. That always happens. Okay, so I plugged my pal pad in. So I'm touching this, but what I did here is that basically this whole area is now under the pictures. I can touch anywhere on my book, and that's how I'm going to read my story or activate sound effects. That really keeps their focus here and not on here. They don't even have to be able to see this. And this has been a really fun option. So that's what we're doing. You'll see the stickers on that page. If we're using, because you can also change. So here, no matter where they push on the page, but if I used a pal pad that's this size, I would place it under those dots, and that's where they know where to push. And so, again, just a fun way to incorporate those switches and use those features. This one just shows we recorded rhyming words. So filling in the blank, reading a story, and these are all kinds of fun literacy things where you stop and it's going to give you the rhyming word and they have to listen. Recipes, those are all just things. Again, the randomizer, same kind of features. It can do those same things. This just shows that randomizer in using those visual cues. So some kids can touch and they understand that symbol, and other kids need the object, and there we put the big foam dice right on. We could also use our object cards, those kinds of things for visual enhancement. This is a fun one, and I just want to talk about this switch briefly. This is a pneumatic switch. It's your puff and sip switch, and a lot of people have them just laying around because they don't have anybody with the oral motor control to do it. But when you break that switch down, I can put that switch into a squeeze toy, and that becomes my switch. So I have one here. I have Santa, and I think we're reading 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. Okay, and so like on this one, this was it's a plastic bottle into the fuzzy duck. It was actually a dog toy, but when we were playing Duck Duck Goose, let me tell you, everybody wanted to use the fuzzy duck. And so, again, engagement is huge. We want to do some things that are just fun and engaging too, within our communication. I want to get to the medley because the medley does both sequencing, randomizing. it does direct select. So I have up to 8 messages. And so, and the overlays are on BoardMaker if you use BoardMaker. So you can touch.
Three. Yeah, what's that?
And then to turn it into a sequencer, I just plug into the sequencing jack and plug in any switch, and now I can start it.
I like it. Yep, I like it. That's not that one.
It's going through.
4.
Or I can change it and plug it into the randomizing jack.
3. That one. Yep, I like it.
So it's doing random. This is one, if they do get off track, all you have to do is touch where you want them to be, and it will start it at that level. So this one does. You have here, you're limited by number of messages. So I can only sequence up to 8 messages, which is oftentimes just great plenty. Where the sequencer and randomizer, you're limited by time. So, you know, realistically, you could have 91-second messages, which you're never going to do. But so here, you know, it's the give and take. What do you need? Here you get a visual cue for each step. Here you have to have a visual cue that just represents your whole sequence. So keeping in mind what the child needs can be very important. It has playback while you record, so you know the message has gotten in there before you have to do the whole sequence. But it also has these 8 external jacks, and I think I have a picture coming up. Yeah, this one. So here what I did is I put up to 8 switches. I put them on what we call a handy board, which is a board of a lot of pre-drilled holes with the cords underneath. Cord management is another whole like area we cover, but and there we put the objects on that go with there was no lady who swallowed a snowman or swallowed some snow on there, so you can access via objects. They can access on the keyboard. All of that's still active. A setup like this is great for a teacher during a circle time where she's trying to accommodate multiple kids with multiple needs. And so we have the object cues, we have the symbol cues all in one. We can sequence, we can randomize. The randomized one is fun because here I can have them even matching. Like if they push on the keyboard the coal and then they have to find it on the switch, you know, that kind of thing. So you can do some learning things with it as far as learning vocabulary. That's always fun. And so lots of different features on that. The other thing that these kind of devices are really good for are quick things, maybe seasonal things. For example, I'm going to move this. Get that out of the way. This was a photo bag from Dollar Tree. And I put in each pocket, I put one of these little switches. And then I put the medley inside here. And we recorded message. This was a trick or treat bag. So this message said trick or treat. This one said thank you. This one we recorded a scary sound. And then this message said, did I scare you? The kids loved it. That's not something they needed all the time. And it was just a fun thing for Halloween, for trick-or-treating. We've used the sequencers and randomizers, for example, with trick-or-treating where we put them actually in those like plastic pumpkin buckets and they carried it around and they reached in and went through the sequence of what they wanted to say. It's so you can really use them that way. The other thing that goes back to the recording is, for example, was with a group in Pennsylvania, and they were doing a project with veterans. They were interviewing veterans, and they were going to write up these stories and things. And they found out that the veterans could not understand the computer-generated speech. So they ended up having to go back and record all their questions on a sequencer, and then were able to interview them. They use their high-tech devices to write up the stories and all of that, but that's that combination of things. So you just really need to know who your listeners are, as well as who, the technology you're going to need to work with them. And so these devices, very important, just very important to have around all the time. And we have holiday things coming up, going to talk to Santa, asking, friends what they want, and all those things that we don't always have time to get programmed into their devices. And some devices have pages, but it's not all the vocabulary is appropriate and all of that. And so sometimes quick and easy, you're going to get more attempts to communicate. On our website, there's a great article. It's older now, but I think it's called 200 a day or 300 a day, the easy way. And it talks about the number of activations kids need to become proficient on their devices. And it is like 200 a day. And we just need to give them as many options, as many times to interact as possible. And kids that are going into gen ed classrooms, even targeting a question every day for another classmate. And this is whether you're in high school or whether you're in preschool. It's like we've got to initiate some of those interactions for the kids. The other thing about all these devices, we've had kids as young as 3 years old recording these devices. And I think that is real important. I mean, now the high-tech devices do give you some choices on child voice, adult voice, male voice, female. And we do need to, if possible, and it isn't always possible, to have kind of an age-appropriate recorded voice. Like a high school boy probably doesn't want my voice in there. And I worked in a school where we had like one guy, and it's like he became our designated recorder. The other thing that hit me years ago, and I've been doing this 35 years now, probably, and one of the first talking devices, speech generating devices, it was a parenchyromic device. It was called the Express One. And we had built this up for this kiddo. You're going to get a voice. This is going to be so cool. And when she got it and we programmed some stuff in, one of the first things she said, and she was crying, was, "You didn't tell me I would sound like E.T." That was not her inner voice. And so we just had to walk her through it. I'm sorry, this is the best it can be right now. And she accepted it. But they have expectations, and they have that inner voice that this is what I should sound like. And so we do need to try to respect that. Again, it doesn't always work, but you can have classmates record. You can have mom and dad record, which brings up another important point about low tech. Here's what I'm seeing happening. Many of the students I worked with years ago are now adults, and I've had the opportunity to go visit some of them, and I've been really disappointed because they all left with very robust high-tech devices, and so far, none of them are using them. Because in the adult world, once you age out of school, you don't get speech every week, and you don't get OT, and you don't get, and there's no one to troubleshoot those devices, and that's a real problem. And so I have gotten to the point where, even though I have parents who often say, well, we don't need this at home, I've tried to explain to them they have to be vested in these devices, whether it's high tech or low tech, because they're not going to have the school as these kids age out to support it. And that has become a real problem. Unfortunately, at least around here, I don't know about out there, adult services haven't caught up with services for kids. And it's a real issue that way. This just shows ways to make overlays. You can make overlays with stickers, and things that are out there. We're going to skip the voice pill levels because that's not one we use. I want to go back. Oh, I wanted to show this. This is an example. Budget, again, is always a problem. And we've always said low tech needs to be with high tech. We're not anti-high tech. That is not it. But for example, this was a school district we worked with, and giving up one high tech device, they were able to put a whole multiple low tech devices. They had sequencers, randomizers, link switches, a number of switches, all of that into 12 classrooms, as opposed to just one high tech device. And I really believe teachers who are having these kids in their classroom, if you really want the kids engaged, the teachers need access to these low tech devices. They need to have something quick and easy at their fingertips as things change in the classroom, to be able to really engage these kids. I am a firm believer, if it works for the therapy, push in therapy where you can actually see how the kids are using it in the different situations is important. We just really need it in all environments, home, school. Otherwise, our kids, especially when they go into gen ed classrooms, become observers, not participators. And I want them to be a participator. We do still have a little bit of time, so I'm going to show you a little more on the object cards because I think there's some fun things going on there. First, I want to preface with our set of object cards, and I think I'll go back up to that slide. That was way at the beginning here.
And Lori, is there any way to get kind of like a list of what you have in those bag kits?
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
What we would put, and that has kind of changed a little bit, but we can put together. I showed the picture of the 12 bags of stuff, it was for Michigan where and she was saying to get a list of things. Yeah, we can put together a list for you of a kit.
A DOM that shows all of the tangible objects.
No, not just tangible object cards, but we put together, it was like a sequencer, a randomizer, a medley, a switch of each size, some battery interrupters. Yeah. So we can talk about that as far as what might be part of that. Because we've combined some products, or that the list specific to that one has changed a little bit. We used to have, rather than the medley, we had one that just did direct selection, a voice pal 8, and one that just did external switches, and we've combined them together. There was no reason to have multiple products. So anyway, so this, again, back to the object cards. I just have some examples. If you're familiar, are you familiar with the Prox Talker? Anybody? It runs on RFI.
I have heard of it, but we have not had Logan Tech on yet.
Okay, well, you need to, because it's cool. This was a joint venture between the two companies. So Prox Talker, it started with the Prox Talker, and it has it uses RFID. I equate it, John just cringes every time I do this in his engineering, but I equate it to kind of like a barcode built into the device. But basically, your symbols have electronics in them. All right. And now this is like your barcode reader. And it looks just like our single message device, just because we use the same enclosure. So now I can, I'm going to turn, make sure it's on. Yeah, it is. I can add one of these. So this is one of our symbol cards. This is the symbol for up. And so I just have to put it here. Can I get up now? And you can record a message, any message you want to go with it. Can I get up now? So it says, can I get up now? And it just knows. Can I get up now? And so without re-recording, I can use a different card. I want to brush my teeth tonight. So there's so many easy ways to make these talk. And the Prox pad is absolutely wonderful in making them talk.
Can I interject something?
Yep.
Here's something I really love. So she had this, I'm sorry, but I really like this.
Yeah.
So this is the RFID tag. You could take this and attach it like to the back of an object. So that's not
this is our bingo.
So now when I move the object close enough,
I want to brush my teeth tonight.
The object in effect becomes our I
want to brush my teeth tonight.
Our switch. Really, really neat.
Yeah. We also do things like that with even the pal pad. So here's that. Getting so mixed up. The small pal pad, and I can slip that in the back of my bingo, and now I have a bingo switch. Okay. We do have a great resource. It's called Adapt This. And it was a book we wrote a number of years ago that is just lots of one-page ideas for the light tech. And it tells you what technology we used and how we set it up. But they're real simple, fun things. And it's now free to download off our website. And so I would suggest if you really want some great ideas, looking at that and downloading that. We also on our website have I lost my train of thought. Some other resources on there. So really look past presentations. There's one called $1 Million Ideas on a Dollar Store Budget. And it's an older presentation, but again, it has pictures of lots of fun ideas in there. So I think everybody could find some things. Back to, I just have some other things sitting here that I'll quick show you. As long as we have some time. So this is back to that pneumatic switch, that puff and sip switch. So here I have a book that has the squeaker built in. And these are some of the kinds of ideas that are in that book. So this is just aquarium airline tubing that we put into the squeaker of this book. And I'm going to plug it in to my sequencer, randomizer, medley, whatever I'm plugging it into. And now this is my switch. Again, it's that whole idea of keeping the technology here. Things you can do with those pal pads. I have used them on the floor as part of obstacle courses because you can step on these. Usually we won't be able to do it with our camera here, but if we're doing a live presentation, we usually stomp on it and plug it in. So I've used it for fun. Like I had a child who couldn't sit still but loved music, and so we put it on his chair, and when he sat down, the music played, and when he got up, it stopped. And again, these weren't magic fixes, but they were fun things to try, and it eventually worked better. And, you know, there was an option, those kinds of things. There's going to be ideas, a lot of switch ideas in there. We have lots of other switches. So often people get just hung up on the jelly bean is the only switch, and there are so many switch options. We have a great proximity switch that can be used. The pal pads, the whole first section of that book is on pal pads. For example, I showed it to you in the book, but let's say you have a child who's really obsessed with bingo or Bluey and all of those, or something else that's out there. I've gotten placemats or paper plates and put this underneath, and now they have a Bluey switch, and that has gotten them to touch it. And you know, just so many ideas like that where you can really enhance it for the child. Are there other questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat, and I've been trying to throw these links up to these things as you're talking about them. But I did hear you mention a proximity switch, and I'm assuming that you're talking about the honeybee.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we have one of those at the OTAP library, and I got to play with it. It was super fun.
Yep. The nice thing, the thing that people like about that the most, that we've gotten the most feedback on, is it has an auditory feedback. It's a different auditory for when it's on, and then it sounds different when it goes off. And we've had criticism, well, we don't want that beep all the time. Well, you can turn it off. It's really for training purposes, and kids really do train better with that auditory cue. So they actually know they've activated something, and then that they move their head or their hand, whatever they're using, and are off of it. So use that auditory cue, but then turn it off. If they are acclimated to it and they kind of know the timing, you can turn it off. So that's important to know on that switch. The other thing we put up that I think is important is on our website, there's a handout on battery adaptions, because so many of the things I've used here, we just use a simple battery interrupter. And if you're not familiar with battery interrupters, again, they look like this. It's just a copper disc on the end of a wire, and that helps you adapt, the toys. I have lights, and I have things for all the holidays. Here's coming up will be Valentine's Day, so we have hearts that light up, and just different things. So that's an important one, because not everything is easily battery adapted. And so there's some guidelines on that handout as far as how to battery adapt and what works the best, and those kinds of things. And so learning to use a battery adapter, like my adapted scissor, I don't remember what company has. I think it's this one that they've pre-adapted, and they charge like $80. And this was $8 on Amazon. And how much is a battery interrupter? 14?
I think they're 18 or 19.
18 or 19. Okay. And a battery adapter, and so more cost effective to, if you can, adapt your own. I haven't had real great luck with pre-adapted stuff. It just doesn't seem to have the wear and tear and that kind of thing. And so really learn to try to adapt some of your own things. The other thing about the little pop lights or tap lights, whatever you want to call them, we've done things where we've made like the gingerbread man, but his tummy, we cut it. No, it's just a paper cutout that we laminated and then slipped it over the top. So you can make these visuals, putting stickers on these, and these you can get, 5 of them for $6 or something, in a pack. And so these are really helpful, I have found. And so there's just lots of things that you can do. I want to touch on, because I know Kelly was on, Kelly Fonner, if you're still there, pop in. With our objects, we had these were not originally developed for kids with visual impairment. They were put together for kids that needed that at this level, and kids with autism, that kind of thing. But we've had good feedback, and Kelly and a group came to us about core words, because I'm a firm believer in core word vocabulary and all that. And they put together a list of ones that they might want. And what we ended up doing, because core words are hard. John, could you run back and just get me a core word set quick? Any of them. What we did to make the core words into objects, and be this right or wrong, it's what we chose to do. We looked ahead at what is the symbol that is most commonly used with those core words because verbs are hard. And so what we did is we tried to find objects that would go with the symbol. And so this is one of our sets. Oh, if I can get it open. Just a minute. Okay. So this is the core word open, and it's an open jar because that's kind of what it looks like on the symbol. The most common symbol for it is the square with the arrow pointing to it. So we made the 3D square. And so we do have 3 sets of core words in the objects. And again, be it right or wrong, it was a place to start. The other thing about the object cards is we know they're not all encompassing, and we have people who say, well, that's not what I would pick, and that's not meaningful to this child. Well, we do have blank cards with some pre-drilled holes there. You can add your own objects and things because I think the format, when you're using a consistent format, like, again, they're a symbol, they're the same size, that kind of thing, is important. And so there are ways you can change them. And we also have a whole list under tangible object resources. Like we have people who, I don't know if it's on this picture, use the calculator, which we have for shopping, they use for math. We have one for TV, that's a black TV. Oftentimes people will use that for iPad. And oh yeah, the TV is on there, you can see. That becomes iPad. And so you can change them. We have a whole list of things that people have told us they use these for. We assigned them a meaning just for our purposes, but you can change that to be whatever meaning you want. So that's important to note too. Other questions on that? It's a lot of information.
We've been going back and forth about some resources and trying to make sure that they can get to that, adapt this.
Yes.
So I'm going to download that and I'm going to put it in with the slide set.
Yeah, I just downloaded it. So people have been having problems. I just downloaded it now. It works. It's a very big file. So just be patient. So it'll take a while to download. But once you download it, it's a PDF file. You can do anything with it you want. Share it all you want. That's up to you.
There is, if you look in the back too, when you get it down to the back pages, the one thing we did is we indexed it by our products, obviously. So it has sequencer and it's going to have all the applications that go with that. But then it has another index that says product features. So you can look up sequential messaging. So if you have a step-by-step or other things that use sequential messaging, you can look up those ideas. In light tech, the nice thing is it's generally easily generalized to other products. So we did index it that way so it would be the most helpful to people. One of the reasons it's free now is there's a couple products in there that are obsolete, but a lot of people still have them. And if you're questioning what you would use, that we still have products that do that. So a lot of the ones that say VoicePal 8 or VoicePal 8K would now be the Medley. So all the applications are still, we have tech that will do it just as easy. So that's good to know too. But the index can be really helpful. And we broke it down, like the whole first section is ways to incorporate the PalPad. Then there's a section on organization and those kinds of things. So I think people have found it very, very useful. And if you guys have questions as you move forward, please contact us. We're always here.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing there's so many tools.
There
so
are
many ways to use them.
There is, and people forget. People forget.
Yes, and that's totally true. You need to hear something many, many times, and when you're ready to hear it or you need it, that's when you're gonna absorb it, right?
Yes, and there's so many ways, especially for teachers, to enhance their environment in the classrooms. And so that's something to keep in mind. And so if we need to do something for teachers, or if people need more information, like the Pal Pads, we put them on bulletin boards and behind posters and behind your weather chart so they can just go up and touch. And so there's so many fun things you can do.
The resources page.
Awesome.
Yeah, our resources page in general, we have lots of different handouts and articles and go through some of our old presentations. Again, you had asked, some of it's old. Well, a lot of that stays the same in the area of light tech, but we've figured out so many more fun ways to use them.
All right, that's wonderful. Well, we have about 2 minutes left. If anyone wants to unmute and ask questions or say anything to these.
We'd love some feedback if it was helpful at all, or.
That's good. It's been very enlightening. I do have a few of these items at the OTAP loan library. And we have a switch assessment kit with many of them in there. And we do have the honeybee.
Do you have Pal Pads? Because if you don't, that's something that's going to be critical. I mean, I
believe I do have one in the switch assessment kit. Yes.
Okay. And we should talk, if you have Taction Pads, you and I should probably talk, because we didn't even touch on Taction Pads, and they're very fun, but they're misunderstood. So.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely have to chat about that, because I certainly don't know all of the options for switches, and there's so many, right?
There are.
I heavily rely on our crew that's here to tell me what you guys need in the library. So.
And we do have a loan program too. People can check things out for a couple weeks. You pay for postage and get it back to us,
And can we find a path for that on your website, or do we call you guys? How do we find that loan option?
Yeah, actually, it is online. There's a form you need to fill out.
Oh, we can't hear you, John.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go.
Muted? Okay. Yeah. So there is a form online. It's I don't know exactly. It's either under the resources or about us on the pull down menu. You print that out. You put everything on there. All your information, your credit card information. What we do charge. I don't know what it is, 12 or 14 or some small amount like that. And that just kind of handles the administrative fee. And then you can put on there the things you're interested in trying, and you get it for 2 weeks. The only reason we have a charge, really, the main reason is once we started doing that, we had a bunch of people who used to always borrow stuff but weren't ever really interested in it. Was free, and once we charged a minimal amount,
Sorry.
They have that little bit of investment in it, right?
Yeah, and all it
good behavior.
But anyway, we can get you the stuff. We can get you the stuff you need, and I just updated that form, so it should be okay. Then all you do is you send it back to us, and we get you on the list, and for 2 weeks you can try things out. And the nice thing is, and I really really like this, if you try out a product and it's not a good match, I don't want you to have it, because it's a waste of your money and your time and everything else. And this gives you a good opportunity to really see if there's a good potential for a fit between what we have and what you're trying to solve.